welcome everybody. I have someone with me that I can't say that we've known each other for over 20 years, but we met each other over 20 years ago when I
Mhm.
went to one of Bob's live events, which I encourage any of you to get out there and meet him face to face. There's nothing like face to face training, though I know you do a ton of stuff virtually as well. But Bob is one of the first people that made me feel like sales was a good thing if you just did it right. And I think Bob is a master at doing things right when it comes to sales, communication, and a lot of other areas. So, with that, Bob, could you give our audience who may not be as familiar with you as I am a little bit about your background and what you focus on these days in terms of what you help folks with?
Well, background was I began as a broadcaster and kind of graduated into sales. And at first I really had no clue as to what I was doing. So I floundered for the first few months until I was in a bookstore one day. This is about 40 years ago or so. And I wasn't sure what I was looking for because at that time, not everybody knew about sales books and personal development books. It just wasn't the thing that everyone knew about. But fortunately, I found two books. One was by Zig Ziglar, the other by Tom Hopkins. I know you're a fan of Tom's and probably Zig's as well, I'm sure. And
For sure.
I got their books and I began to study them, really devour them and utilize the information. And in a very quick period of time, my sales began to go through the roof. And what it said to me was that if you have a system, a methodology for doing something, you can pretty much accomplish anything within reason. And to this day, I define a system as the process of predictably achieving a goal based on a logical and specific set of how-to principles, the key being predictability. If it's been proven that by doing A, you can get the desired results of B, then you know that all you need to do is A and continue to do A, and you'll get the desired results of B. So that's really, what it was. And as I began to study sales, a very natural element of that was personal development. And I found I loved studying that. It was the first time I really came to understand that success is an inside job. It manifests itself outwardly, but it begins in here, and it's through everything you put into your mind and into your heart. And so it was just a lot of fun, a fun experience for me. And went from to different sales jobs, eventually working my way up to sales manager of a company, and from there began to then teach others in other companies selling, and morphed into my own business. So that's really, and I've been doing this for quite a while now, and it's been very fun.
Yeah. So, before I started recording, I mentioned to you that the book that was the hot book at the time when I first came across you was your Endless Referrals book, which was many books ago now.
Yeah.
So I believe your most recent book is The Go Giver. Is that the most recent
Yeah,
one?
well, the series, John
The
David Mann
series, yeah.
and I wrote a series of four books. He actually wrote another one with his wife called The Go-Giver Marriage, but John's and my books are The Go-Giver, Go-Givers Sell More, The Go-Giver Leader, and The Go-Giver Influencer.
Awesome. So I know there are 5 principles in that book, and I've heard you talk about them in other interviews. There's, in the interest of time, I feel like I want to dive a little deeper into one or two of them rather than just kind of hit the wave tops on all of them.
Sure.
And one of them that you talk about is the law of authenticity. And this is something I've struggled with over the years is when I learned the platinum rule, right, as opposed to the golden rule, right? The golden rule being do unto others as you would have done unto yourself. Platinum rule says do unto others as they would prefer to have done unto them. I'm paraphrasing, right?
That was developed by Jim Cathcart and Tony Alessandra, who developed the Platinum Rule many years ago. And yes, it's a fantastic rule.
And the first time I ever heard that, I thought, wow, that just makes total sense.
Mhm.
But your law of authenticity and reconciling that with the platinum rule have been something that I get questions on all the time when I talk about the platinum rule. And the question that I get sometimes is, well, if you're telling me to give people communication the way they prefer to receive it, that
Mhm.
might not be the way I prefer to give it. And so how do I stay authentic and be myself and yet honor the platinum rule? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, this will take a little bit of time to unwrap, but I think it's well worth it. It's an excellent question. So what do we mean by authenticity? Well, first, in Law 4 in the story, the law of authenticity says the most valuable gift you have to offer is yourself. And in this part of the book, Deborah has shared a lesson that she learned that said all the skills in the world, the sales skills, technical skills, people skills, as important as they are, and they are all indeed very, very important, they're also all for naught if you don't come at it from your true authentic core. But when you do, when you show up as yourself day after day, week after week, month after month, people feel good about you. They feel very comfortable with you. They feel very safe with you. And why wouldn't they? They know who they're getting. They know what to expect. And as human beings, part of human nature is a desire to make sense of our world. And this in a world that often doesn't make sense. And so consistency is a very important element of eliciting trust, maintaining trust, building trust. So authenticity is very important. Now, that said, I think the term authentic has, and I've noticed this with the proliferation of social media, that authenticity sort of now become defined as no boundaries. Just say or do whatever you please, whatever you want, as long as it's authentic. You can say it, it's okay. I disagree with that, and let's discuss that. This is sort of like the person who says, well, I have anger issues and I yell at people a lot, and if I were to act any differently, I wouldn't be authentic. Well, I think that's baloney. That's malarkey. It simply means this person has an authentic problem that this person needs to authentically work on in order to become a better, higher, more effective, authentic version of themselves. So, I ask people, please don't use authenticity as an excuse to not be your best self, as a reason to not grow. Use it as impetus to become that highest, best version of yourself. Now, personally, I define authenticity in the following way: acting congruently with your values. Okay, so with that in mind, let's look at an example that I think we can answer the question, now go back in full circle and answer the question. Communicating with, the platinum rule, right? And communicating with people as they want to be communicated with. I think sometimes people confuse authenticity also with what's the word I'm thinking of? Transparency, right? In other words, you have to let everybody know everything that is going on, or you're not, if you're not totally transparent, you're not authentic. Well, again, I disagree. Now, by and large, transparency is a great thing, but it's not always appropriate. Now, here's what I mean. You're a salesperson, you have a sales call with a client. Now, this client is somebody who now you're a very friendly type. You're an outgoing type, and you want to be you're very relationship oriented, and you want to be in deep discussion with people before getting down to business and so forth. That's you. It's your authentic self. But your core value is treating people as they want to be treated. Okay, and respecting other people's desire to be treated as they like to be treated.
Their authenticity.
Okay, their authenticity. So this person this client is somebody who, when you say good morning, they say good morning, and they say how are you, they expect you to just say fine, how are you, and get down to business. That's just how they are. Okay, now this morning you wake up with a horrible neck ache. Okay, you don't even want to be at this appointment. At this point, you don't want to, you're feeling lousy, you wish you could just stay in bed. Now, when this person says to you, hey, John, how are you? Okay, now, if you're going to be transparent, you've got to say, oh, I got to tell you, my neck is absolutely killing me. I just must have slept wrong. I don't even want to be here. But that's not how this person wants to be dealt with. Okay, in this case, what's it might be transparent, but it's not the correct it's not the correct way to act. It's not an appropriate response. So you would just say, great, nice to see you. And you get down to business because that's how they want to be dealt with. Now, there's nothing incongruent about that in terms of your values, because your values treat people as they wish to be treated. That doesn't mean you're going to sacrifice yourself, okay? But you're going to treat people as they wish to be treated, because that's what a human being does. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's what a good human being does. And so now later, when you go to your chiropractor and she says, so John, how are you? You're going to say, oh, man,
It's
right.
killing me.
Now that's appropriate. That's transparent. And that's authentic
Right.
also, because it was the right time in the right place. So again, we don't want to confuse authenticity with meaning. You don't pay attention to other people's needs, wants, and desires.
Yeah. I'm so glad I asked that question, because that was such a good clarification. And it as you were talking, I started to make me think about separating my nature of how I might do something or communicate from my values, right? So my values may be to be a good, clear communicator, but my nature, I'll use myself for an example because it's just easy. My nature is that I'm very wordy. I like to receive a lot of information. So my natural brain function says give a lot of information, not what everybody wants, right?
Right.
So my values to be effective as a communicator don't line up with my natural way of being. But if another one of my values is I want to constantly improve, like you had touched on earlier, well, then I should want to. It's congruent with my values.
With your values, exactly.
To want to be better and say, okay, let me do this list of things that I've come to learn, help me be less wordy and more concise and all those things, chunk things and all these various things we can do. And there isn't an incongruency there. It's the frame that I'm kind of looking at it from.
Yeah,
That was
absolutely. No, that was a great explanation.
That was really, I'm glad I asked you that. There's so many things I want to ask about, but again, we've only got a certain amount of time. So that was one that, in a sense, it was a little bit selfish because it helps me, but also I teach these things and I get that question from people a lot.
I think, yeah, and I think it is. And if you're asked that question a lot, it shows that's an important question.
Yeah. So another thing that I would love to get your thoughts on. So I know you've worked with a lot of salespeople. I know you've worked with very diverse audiences. When you're talking about someone that works in like a big corporate environment, right? People who are working on large teams, and their goals are a little different from a salesperson who maybe their primary goals are a sales goal, right? Some number of sales or dollar volume or whatever that is. Whereas maybe an accounting or a finance person working in a big company, their goals might be to finish certain projects in a certain timeline and different metrics that they have that are different. What, if any, ways are there that you would modify some of the advice that you give on, let's say, for example, building relationships? I know you talk a lot about the importance of building relationships and rapport. In that kind of a corporate environment, how can you adapt some of what you teach about building rapport?
Well, first, even in this corporate environment where you have different people with different agendas, that it's even more important to build that rapport. And as you know, the major premise of pretty much everything I've written, from endless referrals to through whatever, is that all things being equal, people will do business with and refer business to those people they know, like, and trust. Well, we can add, they'll also work with more effectively, they'll communicate better with, they'll be much more likely to want to do for, right? Those people they know, like, and trust. So the different silos may have different agendas and needs and wants and desires and all those things. It's that person who can work effectively with them who is going to really benefit. And that's all about building the relationship. It's also a corporate culture issue and a leadership issue, because when you can bring people together to all, to sort of connect people's goals, right, and make it so that it's part of a cohesive unit, a team, well, everybody's gonna be much more effective.
Yeah, that's great advice. So one of the things that that led me actually to focus more on communication skills is that years ago, it was my weakest area, right? So I actually always felt like I was a people person, like I was good with people. But my downfall was that I lacked an awareness. And one day at a happy hour, somebody after a few drinks just said, "You know, you seem like a nice guy, but I used to think you were a jerk." Right. And I'm censoring myself. It was much worse than that. And it took me aback. I changed the subject because it was uncomfortable. And then the next day at the office, I asked a couple of guys who I knew really well and trusted. I said, "I don't do what they said I did, do I?" And they said, "Yeah, you do it all the time." I ignored people. And it was because I was lacking awareness. I was really stressed out all the time. And I wasn't paying attention to more or less to anyone except for my bosses. So I'm curious if you have any tips on increasing your awareness about how you communicating.
Well, first of all, congratulations to you, because what you did was exceptional. You were able to take that information, as uncomfortable as it was, and I've been through certain things in myself with my own character, certain things I had to take in and accept and realize and recognize. Uh, and I mean, that's tough, but you did it. And you turned a weakness into a strength. So kudos to you.
Thank you.
So as far as awareness, well, all improvement, all advancement begins with awareness, because it's only when we're aware that there's an issue there that we're even in a position to do something about it. Remember, people grow up seeing the world from a certain set of beliefs. I call it our belief system, or our unconscious operating system, right? And aren't even aware of what they're doing. Okay. And if they're not open to the suggestions from people, boom, it just goes right over their head, and they can keep doing living the same life that same day again and again and again, and nothing's going to change because they don't realize that there's anything that needs to be changed. So that's where so I think where it begins is teaching the desire to be aware. And asking, taking the people who you're coaching and you're teaching, and sharing with them, that our belief systems, our way of seeing the world, is a combination of upbringing, environment, schooling, news media, television, everything we see, hear, touch, taste, and smell, popular culture, cultural mores. But it actually gets pretty set in stone by the time we're little more than toddlers.
Yeah.
And we grow up and we live this life thinking that we are operating out of a sense of conscious choice, when really we're basically operating within a matrix. If you remember that first movie, right, where they didn't even
Yeah.
were existing within this matrix, they didn't even know they were in a matrix. And that's what a
Yeah.
belief system does for us. Okay.
Yep.
Or to us, I should say. So the first is saying, what is it that you need to be aware of, that you don't even know you need to be aware of? so
Yeah.
so then it's okay. So open up and just kind of ask yourself these questions, listen for the clues, take some, we take some character traits, and we can say, how do you do with that? How are you with that? And I think the people who are willing to look this, I had to do this at, I'd say it was about 34, 35 years old, in which I had to come to the recognition, the realization that I had certain character traits which were really not good. And I had to do what these days, today, would be called Burg 2.0, right? Back then we didn't have the same. But and what I did, and I was very lucky, there was a guy named Charlie Tremendous Jones. I don't know if you remember that name, but he was one of the big speakers of the day, and he was right up there, with Zig and all the people who were on the rally circuits and all those things. Charlie Tremendous Jones, great guy. And I was very fortunate that he really became a de facto mentor to me. And he was a very much a book person. He always had books to share. And he sent me the autobiography of Benjamin Franklin.
Oh, I've heard that recommended a lot.
Oh, brilliant. Absolutely such a wisdom-filled book. And let me just see if I can Yeah, this is my copy of it. And so
Wow.
it's a little
That
thing,
looks
little
that
old.
looks worse than my copy of Think and Grow Rich. All
Exactly.
yellow.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
And so at one point, Ben had realized, and he was only 20 at the time, but he realized that he had some character traits that were not serving him, and that if he wanted to have the kind of effect that he thought he had the potential to have, he was going to have to change. Well, back then there were no personal development courses to take, and so he made up his own. And the one he talks about in this book were called, the 13 attributes, and basically it's character traits to work on. And he takes you through a system for working on, in this, the number was 13. There's a reason for it. 13 times 4 are 52. You can go through, you can spend a week on
That
one.
tied to the Fibonacci sequence?
Huh?
Is that tied to the Fibonacci sequence? The 13?
Never, no,
Okay. I don't want to sidetrack.
no, it's basically if you take 13 character traits you want to improve upon and work on one, I mean, really work on one per week, put everything into it for an entire week. You go through one a week 13 times, and then there are 52 weeks in a year. 13 times 4 are 52. So you can actually go through the course 4 times. And it's amazing what that will do. And it changed his life, and it made a huge, huge effect on mine. But first there had to be awareness. I had to be aware that there were certain things I needed to change. And it was only at that point, then I looked for a system for doing so. And fortunately, Charlie Tremendous Jones sent me this book, and made a huge difference in my life.
Wow. So many things come up for me with that. But one of them that I had written down earlier, I wanted to ask you about was mentors. So you mentioned Charlie Tremendous Jones, you mentioned Tom Hopkins, Zig Ziglar. I kind of feel like over the years, my mentors have been more through books and courses than they have been one-on-one relationships. But I'm curious, who are some of the other folks throughout your life that have served as mentors?
So I've been very lucky that different mentors have come along at different times and in different areas, always when I needed them to. Now I sought them out and built relationships with them, and always tried the best I could to add value to them, even though I couldn't necessarily in the same way that they did for me. But I always asked questions, and you ask enough questions of enough people, and you're going to find people who respond to that, and that you're able to develop a relation. And a mentor protege relationship is just that. It's a relationship. It's not something that just happens like that. And I find with most, it's not going to be a long-term type of thing. And it doesn't have to be.
Could just be for your season, maybe.
It could be, so now someone like Charlie, it's not that we spoke real often, but we probably spoke, I'd say 4 or 5 times a year, and for a few years. And every time I always felt like I just got well fed, and there was lots of wisdom and lots of heart. And so and others, it might have been 1 time or 2 times. And there are people I call drive-by mentors, and those are those people who just happen to say the perfect thing at the perfect time when you are ready to receive it. And it's happened too. So I don't think it has to be a one-size-fits-all.
So that just reminded me of the other thing I was thinking as you're answering about awareness, is the importance of relationships to that awareness. So for me, what helped me go, wow, I really do need to do something about this, this is important, is that people I trusted, that I knew were not going to say bad things about me without a purpose, right? For any ill intent, right? They were only telling me, hey, you do this thing that's not so great, and you come across in a way, I like you. I think you're a good guy, but you do come across this way. And here are some examples. Because of the relationship I had with them, that made me say, okay, I'm lacking awareness. They're not just trying to cut me down. They're not trying to hurt me. That relationship is what made me willing to address that awareness.
That's absolutely right. That relationship is so very important. And tact and kindness and how we say something is very important. I think that people who take pride in being brutally honest are typically more interested in being brutal than they are in being honest. You know, honesty is very, very important. And so is the way we say something to
So
someone.
when you reach back and grab that book, it made me think about authenticity, because I've wondered in some of your other interviews where I've seen your bookcase, I thought, I've seen a lot of these green screen backgrounds that look like
Oh,
that.
yeah. Yeah.
But
Oh,
I love the fact that I do this all the time in conversations like this, in trainings that I do. I literally, somebody will say something and it reminds me, and I'll pull something off the shelf. But also the fact that you have a beat up, well-worn, well-used copy of that gem of a
yeah.
book. I don't know, there's something about that one little thing. I feel like we have this connection there that so many people, and I'm a big fan of Kindle also, just the, the practicality of it's fantastic, but there's something about an old book that's all,
Oh,
well worn, that just
absolutely. Totally agree.
it's like a nice hot cup of coffee, or I don't know.
Yeah, I
If
remember
you get it,
I remember I don't know if you remember the TV show The Mentalist. It was on about 10, 15 years ago. It was a really good show, but
I
yeah,
think so.
the main character, Patrick Jane, was a big tea drinker. I'm a coffee drinker. He was a big tea
Okay.
drinker. And he used to say a cup of hot tea is like a liquid hug.
Oh, I
And
like that.
that's kind of how I feel about a book, that I can
Yeah.
hold in my hand, and that, it's torn up, beat
Yep.
up, dog-eared. It's got the highlights and the underlines and the notes. It's a hug, it's
Yeah. I
a
think it's one of those things, if you get it, you get it.
yeah,
Right.
yeah,
It's a
exactly.
visceral experience that you have to experience it to get it. And you may experience it and not get it. That's okay. Right.
Mhm.
That's just not for you. I've not typically been, I don't read for entertainment at all. If you look at my bookcase, everything there, it's all self-improvement, psychology, business, different things like that. But different strokes. I mean, however you consume it, if you can, consume to get better, it's all good.
Mhm.
One last thing I wanted to touch on that I thought about while you were talking about the Matrix, and I'm not sure if I'll get his name right, but I think it was David Foster Wallace who gave a commencement speech that people have referred to as the "What is Water" speech. And I don't know if you've heard it, but it starts out with this older fish asking these two little younger fish, "Hey boys, how's the water?"
Mhm.
Right? And the whole conversation is kind of about how we don't realize what we're surrounded with. What brought this to mind for me was, you're talking about how we're raised and the values that we grow up with. We don't even realize it's like we're in the Matrix,
Sure. Oh,
right?
yeah,
We don't realize we're in water. These fish didn't even know, they didn't know what water was.
exactly. Sure, sure. And I had
So
heard of that particular talk, but as soon as you said that the older fish asked, "How's the water?"
I was,
The younger fish probably said, "What water? What's water?"
yeah,
It's
it
like
just,
right. Yeah.
the blind spot, right?
Yeah,
The things
so
you don't
much.
know.
And there's a lot of that in our world. There's a lot of that again, we just don't know. And this is when it comes to financial and physical, spiritual, mental, emotional, social, relational, all these things. We have our ideas on Don Miguel Ruiz and the Four Agreements. He called them
Mm,
agreements, the agreements we've made with the world to believe certain things that the world has handed to us, but those agreements were not consciously made. We
mm.
accepted them long before we had the intellectual capacity to check premises and ask why, and is that true, and how did that person learn it, and who did that. So where, look, I was very lucky. I mean, I had just wonderful parents, loving, kind, supportive parents. And so, but what if you had not, what if a person had parents who told them that they couldn't do this, or that they were this, or that they're, and they grow up thinking, well, that's just how it is, that's how I
That's
see
just
it.
how it is. Yeah.
That's or there's all sorts of things we just accept. In fact, I'll tell you, the best book I ever, it was the first book I read on this. Whoops, sorry. It was published in 1960, called Psycho-Cybernetics
I've
by
heard of that.
by Dr. Maxwell Maltz. This is the first
Yeah.
book that really taught me that, that again, everything we think, feel, say, do is a result of our belief system, how we see the world. And if we see the world a certain way with a certain outcome that we're supposed to have, because that's our life, we're going to go to it just like one of those self-guided missiles, that has a target. They may get off course, but they'll always course correct to go on that target. But if you see the world or certain aspects of the world in a negative way, okay, not because you wish it to be that way, but because that's just your belief system regarding how it is, you will go toward that, and that most likely will be your destination. He shows us how to change that, and how to turn that and so forth. But to me, this was the book that really taught me that, Burg, you don't even know what you don't even know you don't know.
Yeah. I want to say that title comes up for me if I go back through like my history of my awareness of the giants in self-improvement. I feel like that came before NLP in my memory of the evolution of some of the people that I became aware of.
I would assume so.
Yeah.
And again, it was published in 1960, so it's been around for,
Yeah, I don't remember when Bandler started with NLP, but it was I think it was after the 60s. But so I want to respect your time. We're at the top of the hour here. I want to wrap up with something a little fun, but also that I think can kind of connect some dots as well.
Okay.
So when you were a teenager, what did you want to be when you grew up, and how, if at all, does that connect dots with what you do now?
Third baseman for the Boston Red Sox. And I could have been that had I had one thing, and that is talent. And I did not. So that wasn't going to happen. I did become a sportscaster first, and then moved on to news. But no, that didn't end up, really. My teenage goals didn't have anything to end up doing with what I ended up doing.
Okay, interesting.
But
I always find it
everything was a growth experience. Things
Yeah.
led to different things.
Even the way people answer that fascinates me, because I find some people, they find a way to connect the dots even when they sound like they're not connected.
Mhm.
And some people give an answer like yours, which is, this is just what it is.
Mhm.
That's that. Very straightforward, it's very simple. Well, Bob, I really appreciate you joining us, answering some of these questions that were a little bit selfish on my part, but I hope a lot of other people can get some value from and learn from. I would love to continue this conversation another time. Maybe have you back when you've got some time in your schedule, and we can kind of pick up where we left off, because you have so much to bring to the table.
Thank you. Appreciate you very much. Thank you for having me on with you.
And could you just tell us real quick, what is the best way for people to reach out to you?
Best way is just my website, which is Burg, BURG.com. And while they're there, they can check out the daily impact emails that I send out Monday through Friday.
And you have a podcast?
I don't anymore. I keep the archives up. There's about 300 or so, but I haven't had that active now.
But your archive is more than a lot of people who are actively podcasting, so.
Thank you. And we do have some resources there on the site for those who'd like to check it out. We have the Go Giver Success Alliance online mentorship community, and we have the Beyond the Mastermind retreats that we hold here in Jupiter, Florida.
Awesome. And Jupiter, Florida is a beautiful place, by the way. So if you can go get your learn on with Bob and be in Jupiter, Florida at the same time, that's a pretty good combo platter. So, well, thanks again, Bob. And we'll go ahead and wrap up, and we will see all you guys next time.